Zena Krogadal, your American Dreammakers host. I am so glad you were able to join us this evening. So, if you are watching this live, I would love for you to go ahead and share this out. And because we've got a very, very interesting and phenomenal guest coming on. Her name is Michelle Malone, and she is just a phenomenal lady. So I want to make sure that it gets shared out. The other thing is we are live here on StreamYard. So if you can go to streamyard.com/Facebook and give StreamYard permission, that way we can see your name. And don't be afraid to ask questions because we like this to be interactive. So without further ado, let's bring on our guest because let me tell you, she's got some gold nuggets to share with us today. Hello, Michelle. How are you?
Oh my gosh, I'm great, Zena. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Oh, hi, Debbie. So good to see you. Thanks for being here tonight. It's great to have you here, Michelle. So tell us about yourself, where you're living, and what you are up to these days.
Oh my goodness. It feels like I am just nonstop running, running for the Lord, literally and figuratively. But I live in Maryland near Washington, D.C., and I am on sabbatical from education. Didn't retire, I just sort of resigned at the Lord's behest. And I am working with families, churches, school districts on parenting.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Parenting. So tell us your background on all of this and why you have chosen to work with parenting.
Very good question. So I have worked as an educator for 30 years. So in different states throughout the US, different capacities. I worked at all levels of education as an elementary teacher to begin with, then middle school, high school English teacher, and then into leadership, educational leadership as an assistant principal. And when I was promoted to assistant principal, probably about 10 years or so ago, part of my job was discipline and building relationships and discipline. And there was always this issue with a kid getting suspended or just being in trouble for something. And so building a relationship with that child, a bridge, if you will, to show them that, okay, you've done this and there's a consequence for that, but we want you to come back. And let me give you some tips for success for coming back in, right? What I noticed is that whenever you discipline the child, in essence, you're kind of disciplining the parent as well. And so that's a relationship that you have to forge as well. You have to cultivate it. You have to nurture it. And so with those kids who were repeat offenders, I built really strong relationships with them because I was meeting their parents on a regular basis, right? And so the Lord just spoke very clearly to me. This is one of your gifts. You have this relational capacity that probably a lot of people don't have. I can remember people's names and their stories from 30 years ago. And it always blows other people's minds. Like, how do you remember that kid's name? I'm like, well, I know he likes, he's in the Equine Society. He does this, he does that. It's just a gift. It's nothing that I can say that I've learned on my own. But all of those things together gave me the opportunity to pen a book on parenting. I lead a ministry at my church, Bridgeway Community Church in Columbia. It's called Women's Leadership Development Institute. And again, based on relationships. How do we show women in the workplace, homemakers, that they're the CEO of their homes and that they have gifts, talents, abilities, all given to us from God. And you can use those in the marketplace. And so the Lord just has me in a couple different arenas. And I'm just pleased and happy and honored to be used.
Oh, that's so awesome. Hey, Mitch. Oh, so good to see you. Thanks for dropping in. So glad you could be here on this evening. So I think that's Mitch London.
Yeah, cool.
I think that's who that is. So yeah, so great guy, Mitch. He's got a lot going on as well. So which is
definitely.
Oh, definitely. He says, yep, it's him. Mitch.
Oh, hey, Mitch. Yeah, he does a lot of good work for the Lord, for the kingdom. We need him.
Absolutely. So I love, Michelle, that you have really dedicated your life to really getting to know your students and
Mhm.
their family.
Mhm.
And that isn't always the case with educators. I know there's a lot going on when you're an educator. I think some people don't realize how hard of a job that actually is, because there's a lot happening, forming your courses, taking basically being in the classroom with the kids,
Mhm.
and then to take the time to build a relationship with the kids and the family. That is a gift, Michelle. So tell us, tell us, how did you navigate, I guess, that specifically, because and not get burned out.
Well, when you added that last part, you lost me because I did get burnt out. I'm going to keep it real. When you're working that hard at something that not everybody has agreed to be a part of, it's consuming, it's exhausting. And what I mean by that is when you go into a system, a government environment, right? Not everybody wants to hear about the Lord. Not everybody even understands your position. How is it that you're bringing the Lord into this equation? This is a school, right? It's not a church. And all I can say is that if not for the power that's in me because of him, I would not have lasted 30 years. Not one day. Let me tell you a situation. Little story about my last position. I loved my last position. I was at a middle school in a little town in a peninsula community. Beautiful area, horse community, farms, all that good stuff. I took that position after the Lord had specifically told me, Michelle, I'm giving you what you want. You complain, you whine, you're grousing about, but Lord, I can't make a big impact. I'm in this one building. So he gave me an out. He gave me the opportunity to leave. And I'm like, oh my God, the Lord just released me from the school system and I can just go out and do his work, be his hands and feet. Well, I don't know why, but I sought wise counsel from someone who was not necessarily in alignment with what I had been hearing from the Lord. And he talked me out of it. He's like, Michelle, you got to save some money. You got to do this. You got to do that. And I just felt like maybe I didn't hear the Lord right. So I took this position, go into this sweet little community that had so many struggles. And I mean, when I say struggles, I mean warfare. And I don't think people in the building really understood what they were dealing with. We were not fighting against flesh and blood. And there was a lot of flesh and blood fighting, right? And I had been in that community before when my husband and I first moved to Maryland. But I was a teacher at the time. I was an English department chair at the high school next door to the school that I ended up at as my last position, right? And I promised, I said, I'm never going back to that community. It was so much strife, black and white, lots of this, right? And I ended up back in that community, but at the school down the hill, the middle school. And I noticed that some of the kids who were, dealing with the issues they were dealing with, drug use and dysfunction in the home and just all sorts of things, I realized that these kids were the products of the kids that I had taught 16 years prior. And some of the same issues were still going on. The black and white rivalry, lots of just a lot of discord. Let me just put it that way. And coming in with fresh eyes after, say, 15, 16 years, I was able to see some things that needed some light, that people who were steeped in it, immersed in it, didn't necessarily see. And that is basically the lifeline that the Lord gave me. Notice I said life and light. The Bible uses both interchangeably. I was able to see things because of the light of Christ that others didn't see. And as a way of getting through some of those issues, some of the muck, some of the mire, I was able to build relationships in a short amount of time until the Lord finally said, Michelle, I told you could leave. And so at that point, at that point, because it was starting to wear on me because I knew I couldn't do anything about the drug use. Kids who are in middle school who are already addicts, parents coming in to meet with me, and they were so transparent and so loving. They're like, Miss Malone, I don't know what to do. I'm an addict. My kid's an addict. And, it broke my heart, but my face was like flint. I'm like, you know what? Let's pray about it right now. I said, we can break some strongholds right here in Jesus' name, if you allow me. And right there in that office, oftentimes I know that Holy Spirit was filling the room because I requested that he fill the room so that we could give these families some peace and just some relief, you know? So yeah, I was kind of undercover in this last row, undercover for the Lord. And it was obvious. And the relationships that I was able to forge with teachers, with the administration, even though I was part of the administration, with the children. My principal was he was amazed. He's like, how did you make this impact with these kids and these families in this short amount of time? It was all God.
That's so awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Hi, Judith. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Awesome.
Yeah.
And if you guys have any that are watching, if you have any questions at all, because this is a great discussion with Michelle here, because honestly, it is a real issue with our generation of our kids coming through. And because we live in a society right now that you have to watch your P's and Q's. And it thrills me so much to hear that you were undercover. And when the time came, you were not afraid to speak of the name of Jesus. And it sounds like, even though there may have been parents that maybe they weren't Christians, but they, in that moment, in that desperate moment, they also knew that the name of Jesus and the prayers in Jesus was going to make a difference. And that's why they allowed you, is my guess. So for those who are in the education system right now, because I know I have viewers and an audience that they are part of the education system, and those that are Christians, and maybe they're struggling with I don't know what line I can and cannot cross, or what I can and cannot say. What would your advice be to them in this time frame?
You know, everything should start with a conversation. Number one, between you and the Lord, between you and your leadership, and just let them know your story. We're all human, right? And one thing that I don't apologize for is knowing the Lord from infancy. I know that. I knew him as my friend and my father as a little girl, right? I wear everything that promotes the Lord. Like when I went to work every single day, I had on some kind of t-shirt that talked about the Lord, Beacon Threads, you know, hopefully they'll give me an affiliate or something. But I always wore something that said blessed, or, you know, created for a purpose. I almost wore my t-shirt tonight, but I didn't know what you were wearing. So I didn't want to be underdressed tonight. And some of the teachers at my last couple of schools asked, how is it that you get away with wearing things like that? I'm like, it's not a matter of getting away with it. Number one, we don't have a dress code, so to speak. And so no one can say, hey, Michelle, you're not in dress code. The dress code is dress professionally. So the way I see it, I can wear whatever I want to, as long as I look professional, I'm clean, I'm well done, you know, got my little makeup on or whatever. And I just happen to be representing the Lord at the same time, right? And so I just say, stand on your principles, know what they are, know who you are in Christ. And that's where it starts. That's the beginning of understanding, that knowledge, right? And so for me, it was just easier to say, this is who I am. I don't have to tell you, you already know. When I walk in the room, you feel the light, you see the light. And that's not Michelle. I know that's coming from inside, that's coming from the Lord on high, right? Anyone who has met me will say, oh my God, when she walks in the room, you know she's in charge. Well, guess what? It ain't me. It's the Lord that's in charge. I just happen to be a willing vessel. And I just love people. I love his people. And I think that's really my superpower as well.
That's amazing. And we definitely need more to come and be bold, because I know if anybody's been paying attention to what's been going on, it just seems like we're just losing less and less of our traditional values, of family values. And so it is a huge fight. Like you said, it is a fight that is not of flesh and blood. You know, it is absolutely a spiritual warfare. And so learning to fight that spiritual battle, yes, be that vessel.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Judith. And wherever God puts you. So now that, you know, you're not in the school system anymore, and you are now on a mission to continue, but helping to a greater scale that parenting relationship. So tell us more about that dynamic. You know, what inspired you to write your book? And I'm going to put this book up here because you all want to go to Amazon and get this book. You want to get this book, and you want to get this book for your any friends that are parents, because the Parenting Playbook. Wow. So tell us a little bit about this, Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So a couple of summers ago, and as you know, people who are in education, typically they have their summers off. I'm going to put that in quotes, or as my kids used to say, bunny ears. Uh, Teachers aren't typically off in the summer. They're usually working a second job. They're working summer school. They're going back to school to get, certified in something. But as a school leader, I was able to take leave for like a month and a half during the summer because I had accrued it over the course of the year. And during that summer, I wrote this book. It's a short book. It's a good read, but it's all based on biblical principles. And the anchor verse is Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, so that when he is old, he will not depart from it. And what I did is I got into a deep study on just that one verse in different translations. And train up really just means to guide them, to walk alongside them, to disciple them, right? Think about Jesus and his disciples. What was his everyday walk with them? He taught. He spent time with them. They built that relationship. They trusted him because not just because he was the Messiah, right? They trusted him because he was a man of his word. And we as Christians know he was fully man and fully God at the same doggone time. But they learned that, he had a temper at times, knocking tables over and, chastising them when they fell asleep. They couldn't stay awake, for just a few minutes as he stepped away to pray. He was human. And so what I was able to do with this book is I cobbled together all of my experiences as a teacher, as a mentor to first, second, and third year teachers, as an assistant principal, as a leader in the church, all those different experiences. And I started off with the one caveat. I told my story in the intro, right? But I always want to make sure I say this so that parents don't believe that I think I know more than they do. And so I shared this with you earlier, but I do not have children of my own. And the good Lord, he dealt with me on that because I grieved it. I am my mother's only child. And so when I didn't like things, I was able to just speak my mind. And that's the relationship I have with the Lord since little, right? And I was so upset that, Lord, you would give me this man. We met in this place. We got married. And, I want to have a family full of kids. And he said no. And I didn't know why. I'm like, why wouldn't you allow me to have kids? Well, he told me years later that he's like, Michelle, first of all, 1 wouldn't be enough for you. 10 wouldn't be enough for you. I just know you. You're my child, right? And even if that were the case, if he had given me 10, I would have wanted 15. If he had given me 15, I would have wanted 20. That's how I'm built, right? But instead, he wanted to give me thousands. And so literally in 30 years, I have had thousands of students come through my classrooms, thousands of kids come through the schools where I was a leader. And, and that has been satisfying. That is what worked for me. But I took all those experiences, put them in a book, broke down Proverbs 22:6. And from the perspective of, I get to look at a situation almost from an aerial view, like an eagle, or just if someone's let me put it this way, you're having an argument or a disagreement with someone. You can't resolve the issue easily because you're too close to it. Sometimes it takes someone whose proximity is just close enough, but not in it. And you can see where the issues are, where the hot spots are, where the red flags were, because you're close enough, but you're not in it, And so I look at this parenting playbook and the coaching that I do with parents and school systems and churches and things like that as I have the aerial view. I may not have all the answers, but I see what the issue is. I see the genesis of the problem. And it looks like red spots to me, like it's a hot zone. And I know that that's where the issue happened. And all these things that we're fighting about right here, this is not the issue. This is a byproduct of us not communicating or not agreeing on something. And so, scripture even asks the question, can two walk together unless they've agreed to do so? And the answer is no, 1,000%.
Wow. That's incredible that you can zero in on people's issues like that is what it sounds like. Like you get that bird's eye view. That is a gift. Absolutely a gift.
It is.
Because not everybody can do that you can come in and say, oh, that your issue isn't what you're arguing about isn't really the issue, but it stems back from, a different spot in the relationship. That's amazing. So once you determine that, how receptive are the parents really to receiving how to fix it?
So that's a good question. I love that you asked that, because not everybody wants to own their stuff. And if they're not willing to own their stuff, we may have to step away from the relationship. And I say that on the front end. Sometimes people think they want a life coach, but what they really need is therapy. And I will never take anybody's money if what you need is a therapist, because I'm not a therapist. I'm real. I'm honest. I'm a woman of integrity. And there's not any amount of money that the Lord won't give me, So I'm not going to take yours if you think you need a life coach or you think you need an ally. That's not who I am. That is not who I am. And no coach should be doing that. What I offer them is the question that Jesus offered those people who needed to be healed. Do you want to be well? That's it. And if the answer is, well, I said, or, he is, no, do you want to be well? We can ask him the same question in a couple minutes, but do you want to be well? Do you want to restore peace, joy, and order to your home? If the answer is yes, let's get past that. Get that ego and put it somewhere. Let's talk about the issue. And bottom line, it's not about you and dad having issues or dad and mom having issues. The focus, the priority should be God, family. God, family. And actually, if we want to make it a little bit more concrete, God, spouse, family. That's what the word says. And so we, as parents, you can work on your own stuff, but ultimately you have agreed. You see, there we go back with that agreement. You have agreed to train up these children in the way they should go. And so if you're training them up in the way that they should go so that when they're older, they won't depart from it, that means you are creating a legacy. And if you are legacy minded, you will deal with the small stuff. You're not going to sweat the small stuff. You're going to get past it. You're going to reorganize or prioritize or get your footing. That's what the word I was looking for. Get your footing back. Yeah, you're going to have disagreements, but we agreed to raise this child under the banner of the Lord. And so let's get ourselves together and let's do what we agreed that we were going to do. And so, yeah.
Wow, that's great. So you had mentioned that sometimes they may require therapy versus coaching. Can you tell us what determines that? When somebody needs therapy versus coaching?
You know what? And that's another good question. It's all about the discernment. And I'm going to say there are some folks out there who will still take your money, even though your heart is hard. And that's not me. I can't do it. I will say, hey, can I take my coaching hat off for a minute? Can we just be real for a minute? Sure. Let's be real. All right. So what I see is that there's some trauma from childhood, or there's some trauma from whatever this last relationship was. And you're bringing all of that stuff into this new dynamic, husband, wife, children. And so I really suggest that you find a Bible-based therapist who can work with you with some of those blocks, some of those strongholds that you're dealing with. Because if you bring those strongholds into the relationship, you're still bound by those strongholds. And so you got to be delivered from that. You got to work on it. You have to know those things exist, And so otherwise, there's no chance of this relationship building what God intended it to build. Right. So I'm honest about it. And I say, hey, we're gonna get rid of this contract. We're gonna prorate our time together, and whatever we've done together, that's mine, and then everything else is gonna be yours. Sometimes they say, no, I want you to keep it so that whenever we work together again, then I already have that down payment. But it really isn't about the money. It's about the individual in front of you. And my heart is always about restoring the family, bringing peace, joy, and order to the home. And there are simple ways to do it. Not that parenting is simple, but my course is actually called Parenting Made Simpler. And it's really about just refining some of your practices with some of the classroom practices that made my classroom just like, they didn't need me in the room because of some of the things I was able to teach their kids. And if I could do that in a classroom, you can do it at home. And so I'm just saying all these things, and I'm kind of all over the place right now, but I just want families to know that there are solutions to your pain points and your frustrations. And it may not be in a book. It might be in a book.
Well, it might be in this book right here.
Oh my God, that is so good. That is so good.
In fact, you can go to Amazon and get this book right here, because the answers may be in this book. Absolutely. Because Michelle obviously has a wealth of knowledge that she is sharing here, and from years and years of experience of interacting with a parent and child, and how to get that relationship on a healthy trajectory.
Yeah.
Because so much when you talk about traumas, the honest truth is that many of our traumas, because sometimes people think trauma has to be this big event that happens, but really trauma can be just the relationship that you had with your parents, just something that was said at some point that really traumatically it affected you. And it may not have been like this big event. It may have just been in that moment, something was said and taken in a whole different way. And as a child, we see things very differently. As a child, we don't see the whole picture of our parents and why they said what they said.
Right.
But as a child, we can say, oh my gosh, that was just so brutal. But really, when you become an adult and you have your adult brain and you go back to looking at those things, I know I've been like, oh, now I understand why my parents said that. It wasn't because they were this mean person and they didn't want me to have a great life. But as a child, I could have kept that all the way through and hung on to that feeling and that emotion of that word or that phrase that was said or that moment. And the reality is that, like you said, it can be, learning and realizing that is step number one, right? Trauma can be just that, not to minimize it, but you can carry those things throughout your life. And then now that emotion can affect how you parent your child, and how you bring that in. And so what you're doing, Michelle, it sounds like you are working to break generational habits.
You got it. You got it. Habits, patterns, behaviors, all those things. Look at it this way. We live in the world, but we are not of the world. But we've been in this world all our lives, right? So the world teaches us things that maybe if in the home we're teaching something different, kids wouldn't be so drawn to the patterns and the behaviors and the customs of this world. But the world is flashy. The world is exciting. There's so many things out there, it glitters and, it's all those things, very appealing when you're young and you haven't gotten caught up in all those things. You see all the trappings. Well, you don't see the trappings as a little person, and your brain is still developing. I really love middle schoolers. Nobody in their right mind does, I know, but I'm one of those people. I love the middle because their brains are still developing. And the way the Lord put it in my mind, he's like, Michelle, this is fertile ground. This is the place where you can help to determine whether people go left or right. It's just that simple and that serious. You can get kids to pivot so quickly as a result of your relationship with them, and if God sent you there, and so I knew that the Lord had sent me to middle schools after I loved teaching high school. I loved it, loved it, loved it. Built really good relationships with kids. But when I went back down to the middle, I'm like, I love it here. Yes, it's tumultuous. Yes, it's crazy. Yes, a kid is going to walk in the door one day with a sombrero on and knee-high stockings. Yes, he's going to do that one day. Or in a clown suit. They did weird, crazy, bananas things because at that level, they want attention. They think everything's funny. They don't play it out in their minds like, oh my God, what's going to happen to me if I walk into this building on skates and I'm wearing a sombrero and somebody pushes me and then I fall and then I have a concussion. They don't see all of that. They see the beginning. I'm coming in with a sombrero and a pair of skates or knee highs or whatever the case may be. They don't see how it ends. They just see how it starts. But what I love about that opportunity is you have the opportunity, if you have the right mindset. And I'm not saying perfection, because I lost my temper many days. I'm like, you got to go. You got to get on out of here. Now, when you come back to normal, when you act like you got good sense, you can come right back in this office. But you have to be firm. You have to be fair. You have to show them that you love them. And they come right in. That was my experience. There were kids who are so-called tough guys who came in and they were begging me not to leave. Like, why don't you wait until after Christmas? I'm like, I wish I could, but I got to go and do X, Y, and Z. And then they became my little walking advertisements when kids would say, oh, why are you leaving? I heard you're leaving. She's going to go work for the Lord. She's working on a book and she's working on this. I'm like, oh my God, this is so funny. It's so funny. But again, and I may have missed the whole question there, but when the Lord has sent you someplace that you're at the right place at the right time with the right people on assignment from him. And so I've always known that in my experience, every place I can look back and I can see where he was in the equation. So it's just a good place to be.
That's awesome. That's really, really awesome. So you spent 30 years in the education system. And you currently live in Maryland.
Uh-huh.
Now, how long have you been in Maryland for? And then it wasn't all 30 years there?
No. I started out in South Florida, and I wasn't even an educator at the time. They were looking for minority educators, and all you needed to have was a bachelor's degree at the time. And so that's how I ended up in education. I was actually trained to be a journalist. So I'm a writer. I have a degree in broadcast journalism. I love writing. Oh my God, it's one of my gifts. And so I thought I was going to work in television and radio, which I did do a little TV and I did a lot of radio, but it didn't pay the bills. Number one, I was still living at home and working at a radio station. Right. But it's something about it, all that glitter, the glamour of it all. It fell on deaf ears with me. Once I was in it, I didn't like it. And so I was looking for other opportunities. And one of my girlfriends who had just graduated, we graduated together, said, hey, me and my sister moved to South Florida. They're looking for minority educators. Why don't you come and sleep on our couch for a couple of weeks, interview and see what happens? Well, I got the job. I'm like, you do understand, I don't have a teaching degree. I don't even know if I like kids. And they're like, no, we are in desperate need. And what better place to start? Beautiful, sunny South Florida, right on the ocean. And that's where it started. And I found my way into the community. I was working part-time because teachers always have like a second gig. I was working part-time at the Boys and Girls Center in Fort Pierce, Florida. And then I ended up with a third job. When you're young, you can work a whole lot of jobs, right? But the Sheriff's Department had this grant. And they asked me to work and do just education with kids who had misdemeanors. And so as a way of them getting caught up, so to speak, credit recovery and all that stuff, they needed some support. And so the Sheriff's Department brought me on to coach these kids, to take them on field trips with another person. And And I worked with them for an entire school year. That was my third job. And so I did all that. And the Lord just showed me, you can work with all kinds of kids. Even though I didn't think I liked kids, they were drawn to me. Even the ones who had these misdemeanors, they were in the system already. And here's this little person, and I was a tiny little thing, with a big old mouth and some authority, right? And they listened. These are kids who had done some things that like I'd never done, but they listened. And so I just say that as parents, your kids are a captive audience. Mm-hmm. And what you say matters. And they listen to what you're saying. Even when you think they're not, even when you think they're zoned out and they're doing other things, they're still listening and they're still watching and they're still paying attention. And so again, they're captive audiences. Where are they going to go? They live with you. So take advantage of that classroom that you have at home as their first teachers and focus on legacy. Because when they leave your home, they will have those core values that you've instilled in them. Hopefully the love of the Lord, right? And they're going to raise their own children based on what they learned in your home/classroom. Mm-hmm. That's simple.
And I'm really glad that you are saying this, that you as a parent need to realize that you are their number one teacher. It's basically what that comes to. Mm-hmm. Because I believe and I have observed that we live in a society right now that parents don't see it that way necessarily. Some of them see it as, well, somebody else is going to teach my kid, whether it be at the school or at the church. But I definitely have seen some parents just really exit out and say that, I want you to fix my kids. I want you to make them better. And they just haven't really taken on that full responsibility of, you're the parent and you are actually their number one teacher. So what that means is that you have to watch what you say and what you do, because they learn by observation quite a bit more than even the words that you say, right? Yeah.
What's hard there though, Zena, is, I agree with what you said. There are some who exit stage left. But ultimately, I know that every single parent, they send their best to school. Dr. Taylor, who was my first principal in South Florida, she was this sage and this beautiful woman, right? She said, Michelle, because I was making all sorts of mistakes. I wasn't trained as a teacher. And so all I had was discipline. And, I was a smart young woman, so I knew how to teach certain things. But sometimes things would come out of my mouth that shouldn't have come out of my mouth. Like, nope, you're going to go do this, because I had learned from former teachers who were not all that great. Now, my former teachers who were amazing, I took a lot from them as well. But when you're starting out and you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're doing. So, but what I learned about parents is that, number one, you send your best to school. That's what Dr. Taylor taught me. So whoever that little guy is that comes into your classroom, whether it's an attitude or whether it's a straight A student, that is their best that they've sent to school. And part of the issue, I think, is that we don't always see kids as the best. We hear the stories from previous teachers. Oh, yeah, he's a handful or she's a handful. Oh, she'll cuss you out or whatever. One thing that I can say, and this has nothing to do with me as an individual, but it's the light of Christ again, no one ever cussed me out in all the years, even at one of the toughest high schools that I worked in. Nobody ever cussed me out. And I believe that the Lord has protected me and shielded me in that way so that no one would give me that level of disrespect. But I also learned not to match people's energy. And so whenever I saw arguments or disagreements going on, I had to make sure that if I was equipped to get in there and do it, I had to get in the middle of it and say, hey, let's take this elsewhere, or let's just stop right now. You got an opportunity to pivot and stay in school today, buddy. But if you go any further, you're going to be out of here. And you know what happens when you're out of school? You get into trouble. You got to paint a picture for folks. I didn't realize I was a painter, but yeah, sometimes. But back to parents and kids being a captive audience, I think part of the issue, Zena, is that parents don't always realize that they are equipped to do the job. Otherwise, God wouldn't have given you this child, right? Mm-hmm. But you have a bench. If this is a basketball team, think about your top 5 people who can help you to raise your kids. Who, if you weren't there, would be the folks, the 5 who would jump on board and help you out. And if you can name those 5 people who would be on your team, who might be sitting on the bench, those are the people who are going to help you out. And I remember once I was sitting, one of my pastors, one of our associate pastors, Dave Mitchner, and I taught a class. It was a hybrid class and at 2 different church campuses. It was fun. But he and I did this thing called Parent Talk. And we had some people who were online, some who were in the room. And then the next week we'd be at a different facility, but the same setup, right? And I had this one set of parents. They came in as a family unit. And the one lady said, Michelle, I don't know if I have people on the bench. We moved here from such and such a place. There is nobody in my immediate area that I trust to have the same family values that my husband and I have to help us out. So I my first question was, wait a minute, you don't have any friends in this area that you go to church with, people that you're in community with? Well, yeah, we have such and such. Okay, so you got someplace to start. We oftentimes want to have control of so much that we have no control over anything. And so learning that God puts certain people in close proximity to us to help us. You're not supposed to use their blueprint necessarily or think that what they're doing is better than what you're doing. He put you on a particular path and you are equipped to do the work of a parent. You're a CEO, you're a leader, whatever you want to call yourself, but you already have everything on the inside of you. And if God didn't do that, didn't give you all those things, he certainly would put people in close proximity to you to sharpen you. As we say, iron sharpens iron. So everything is already planned out. It works out, but you have to be aware of it, number one, and realize that this is a joint effort. We must work in tandem, with the rest of the body of Christ. This is not just me, myself, and I raising these kids. God has put all these wonderful people in our paths. He's put books. Since we did that earlier, he's put books, written by experts about different things to help you in your journey. So you're not alone, but you have to be willing to put in the work and not put your responsibility on somebody else, to your point earlier.
I love it. I love everything that you're saying, Michelle. It is so awesome. So if you guys want to go to principalmichelle.com, check her out and you can get in touch with Michelle too. So she loves people. So if you have questions and you want to reach out, absolutely reach out to Michelle for sure. And absolutely get that book, that playbook, the Parenting Playbook. Let's see if I can add that to the stage again here.
Thank you.
Because it is going to be such a great resource for you. Because let's face it, parenting is not an easy job. There's so much happening and there's a lot at stake. And sometimes you're right, Michelle. Sometimes we think we can go it alone and we have nobody. But the truth of the matter is that God puts us in a place where, that's why he says, don't forsake the fellowship, because there's such power in fellowship.
Yeah.
And when you can allow other people to come in and help you, I know that's kind of the Asian way of parenting, is that the whole community pretty much is involved. I grew up here in Flagstaff, but I grew up very traditional Vietnamese culture. And so I grew up where my parents pretty much said every adult had the authority to discipline me. They were serious and they allowed it. They allowed other people who were not my parent or even related to me once in a while to spank me if I deserved it. And they didn't say, oh my gosh, get your hands off my kid. It was because they trusted their friendship with this person, that person loved me and had my best interest in mind. And if they felt like I was misbehaving to the point where I deserved a little swat on the butt, they did it. And so you can better believe that because of that, when I hit school, I was a very well-behaved student because I did not want to get in trouble 2 or 3 times.
Absolutely.
Was going to call my parents and tell them that I was in the principal's office. it was going to be game over for me. And so there was no defending me like you see today, where the parents are like, get your hands off my kids. What are you doing? But it truly does take a village. And I think sometimes we have lost that element of trusting others that they can help, rear your child into a great adult. And so I'm grateful that my parents gave me that gift of that healthy fear,
Yeah.
that I knew, okay, I need to make sure I am respectful to the adult that is in front of me. And because if I'm not, I'm going to be in so much trouble, not just with my parents, but with everybody else. And I did that with my children. That's how I raised them as well. When I had them, I was a working mom, so I had them at a babysitter that actually was my next door neighbor, who became a very good friend.
Nice.
But I told her, you know what? If my kids act up, go ahead and discipline them just as you would your own kids, because I trust you. I've seen you with your kids, and I totally would know that. And so she would discipline them, put them in timeout. I think she even did swat them a couple times. Talk about it. And I remember coming home from work, and like my daughter was in a timeout seat, and she's like, Mom, you're here. Does this mean I'm out of timeout? And I said, well, who put you in timeout? Well, Miss Carrie. I said, well, then Carrie is the one that's going to have to take you out of timeout, just because Mom showed up. I wasn't here all day. I don't know what was going on. But I have pretty well behaved kids, and they've grown up to be incredible adults. So I think you definitely hit a huge principle there, is that allow the people in your life to help you. Because not only that, but sometimes you need a break. Let's just face it.
Yeah. Because if we're hustling all the time, I don't think God intended us to hustle. He really didn't. Not in our home, not in our workplace. He did not intend for us to hustle. And I get it. I get it. People want to do better. They want better than what they had as kids. They want better for their families. I get it. But God didn't intend for us to hustle. There has to be some peace, joy, and order in our lives, and not necessarily in that order, but we should have them all.
Yeah. Well, I loved having you here today, Michelle. You gave us a lot of great wisdom. Is there anything else as we wrap it up that you would like to leave us with?
Just, my God, we talked about everything today. Just do your best, show up. And you can't fake showing up. That's another quote I stole from my pastor. You can't fake showing up. So show up. Even if you don't feel that you have it all together, show up. That's what your kids are going to remember.
Great words to leave us with. Absolutely. Michelle, you have been a real blessing. Continue to be that bright light in this world, because it is so needed. And thank you so much for taking on that mission of helping parents and children have peace in their relationship, and learning to find that joy and all of the things that are just so necessary to have a healthy relationship, and leaving that legacy, like you said. So thank you so much. Keep up the good work, my friend, and we will see you later.
Take care. Thanks, Zena.
You're welcome. Gosh, you guys, that was an incredible time. If you found value in this live stream, this podcast, please share it out and let everybody else know about it. And absolutely get that book, The Parenting Playbook by Michelle Malone. And it is on Amazon. And yeah, you guys, that was just a fantastic conversation. So I am Zena Krogadal. Thank you for being here. If you have not already, like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, my Facebook. I'm also on Instagram and on LinkedIn, and I'd love to connect with you. So send me a message. Love to connect with you. And so I will say goodbye for now, and have a wonderful rest of the day.